Welcome back to another episode of Decoding Athletic Performance. Today with Slick Mitch and Coach Mike, we're going to be taking you through our progressions and phases of training when it comes to everything to do with the foot.
When starting to incorporate foot and ankle training into our athletes programs here at MFP, we utilize a lot of mini circuits that are done as preparation for their training sessions later on. We do a lot of intrinsics work, static, whether that's seated or standing, and we utilize time and volume-based progressions to make sure that we get really strong base within our tendons, ligaments, and muscles before we move on to our more dynamic work.
Phase now. But you know there's more than that. In phase 2, we progress the intrinsics to dynamic movements, such as heel, toe, lateral foot walking. Not only do we go here, but we also start to do isometrics on the single leg. So really starting to challenge stability and your control. From here, we progress into the start of our barefoot training. This is where we introduce you to accessory lifts such as lunges, split squats, hinge mechanics, even upper body movements, where the big focus point is the foot and how it connects to the ground and what you're doing with the foot in relation to all of your training accessory movements in the gym.
What Mike is talking about here in terms of feel of the foot is critical. We introduced the tripod concept in phase 1 of their training, understanding where the pressure points should feel through the foot in different positions. And now starting to link that into more dynamic movements becomes really important for when these athletes go back into things like football boots and basketball shoes, which kind of suppress the feeling of the foot. Where we start to integrate this stuff is in our movement preparation. We start to utilize things like animal flow or go-to methods to really promote the linkage through the foot, where they're not necessarily just focusing on the foot, but they still have to have the feel on the ground while they're doing something more dynamic. Our progression model here is more based around intensity and complexity, which might involve things like intensity of contraction, manual resistance, or complexity of movement, which is where the animal flow and the go-to stuff starts to come in.
Yeah.
Go-to method a little bit there?
I'll get it here. So when it comes to complexity, it doesn't just mean you've got to go and hang 500 million things off or grab 500 million bands. We're actually just talking about complexity of the drill itself. But this leads us into what's next, which is to do with phase 3 and the stability and balance aspect of what we're doing, where we start to introduce new surfaces, implements, and different tools to assist us in challenging the vestibular system. Oh yeah, I got that good, huh? We then take it a little step further, and rather than just surface and what we're doing or what we're standing on or where we are or what we're landing on, we can start to take things further with visual stimulation. So by taking the eyes out, or by starting with the eyes open, closing them, open, close, challenging with catches, catching drills as well. So we start to really challenge the stability aspect of the foot into drills that will help us to, well.
You're on a roll, dude.
I know, I just had to wrap up.
Yeah.
It was just the wrap.
Yeah.
I just had to put the bow on it.
You had the dinger
I just had to put the bow on it and put the present under the tree. It happens every time, folks. Okay, here we go.
Well, I didn't even know where you started and ended.
No, I'm good. Okay. What we mean by complexity here is the fact that we're not just looking at all the bells and whistles, but complexity of the drills themselves. Starting with your most basic, where there's one toe lifted, to making beautiful toe pianos, where you've got this fluent movement of your toes flowing through the air whilst one is up and the rest are down. It's naturally vibing. Post that as a blooper. Okay. What we mean by complexity is actually around two things. First thing is surface and integration of what we're doing to challenge stability and coordination. So we want to start to challenge the foot by changing the surface or the environment it's in. Obviously at this stage we're really looking at barefoot and then the foot and the way that it's challenged on stupid things like pebbles. I've lost it. I've lost it. I'm meant to talk about surface here.
Yeah, true. Are you still talking about this?
I lost it. I lost it. I'm gone. Okay.
In phase 3.
Okay, no. So you got
Talk
to
about
there.
vestibular and visual.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was trying to get to.
Surfaces. And
But-
then I'm going in here. It's actually...
Yeah. Okay. So with the complexity aspect, we want to start looking at phase 3 a little bit here as well. So we want to start to challenge the foot by changing the stability and balance drills that we're doing, looking at surfaces first. So rough surfaces, uneven surfaces, unstable surfaces. Yes, there is some play and there is some use to them outside of what people will say. We want to challenge the foot on these things to help it strengthen and to get used to the feeling of the foot in these environments. The next thing, and the big play,
Pause there.
I know what I want to do, but so this video has up to you doing well, and then we'll edit it, and then the next video is me. So once we get through phase 2, while we start to increase the complexity, it really starts to take the next step in phase 3. This is where the big money is. This is where the big transfer is. From all the hard work that we've done to lay the foundation, where we can start having a bit of fun and do some cool stuff. So the first thing we look at is challenging the stability and balance. The 2 key pillars of this are the surface. What type of surface are we using? There's a kinesthetic awareness that connects the foot and the brain together. Right? We all know this. It's the big link from the nervous system. So kinesthetic awareness is what is under your foot and the feedback that goes back up to the brain. So we actually want to challenge the foot with different surfaces, contrary to what a lot of people say about balance drills and if they've got any benefit. Of course, if that's all you do, it's a waste of time when there's so many other things you could do. But with the right stimulus and the right introduction, the right use, they're great drills for that awareness, proprioception, and increasing the capacities of your vestibular system. Which links into the next bit really well, where we start to add visual challenges to the training and the balance drills. Closing and opening the eyes, catching and passing drills that make the drill a little bit harder by increasing the awareness of what's going on and the complexity of the skill involved in what you're doing.
This is an important consideration because our barefoot plower and ballistic work can actually be a major focus of our program by the time we get to phase 3. So we might not want to be doing too much primary and accessory barefoot work if this is a big focus of our program. One, in season, they might be doing a lot of remedial plyometric work, focusing on grooving the relationship between the foot and ankle complex with things like the rudiment series from Maltus. But also, if they're off season or maybe even in season as well, we're looking for true power expression with our ballistic work in barefoot with things like med ball work, Olympic lifts such as a clean, and then also our loaded and unloaded jumps.
Back to me. Always be safe and be careful and start with less. The less is more approach, right? Because you don't want to give someone too much of this stuff straight away, especially if you don't know their case history or what they've done in the past. Because,
Or if you've got my ankles.
yeah, if you've got $1 million athlete and you've ruined their foot, guess what? That's career changing and you're in trouble. Go out, do some reading, team. Stay safe, stay healthy, and train hard. And we'll see you on the next video.
I'm way happy with that ending. That's much better. Dose up how much we're actually doing. This is particularly important when we're looking to integrate it with not only our primary lifts, but also our barefoot plyo and ballistic work as well. All right. This is where we can see true transfer into athletic sporting movements. In things like our remedial plyometric work.
Can't save you.
I couldn't save myself.
That big as well. Where'd you get to?
This.
Oh, no, because I've just done the careful bit. So you can restart there. Careful when I pass it over.
Yeah. Dosage, and talk about dosage. Yeah,
Talk
cool.
about that. But we need to be careful.
Go again.
Clap.
Testing. 1, 2.
Oh, that's how I get myself ready. ASM.
Testing. 1, 2. Integration into our athletic sporting movements is the next step. All right. And while we're not going to plow through heaps of vision of the athlete actually playing their sport, just simply don't have time for that, where we start to look for these leaks of energy through the foot and whether we're getting transfer from our phase 1, 2 to 3 is things like our agility circuits, our speed and sprint technique circuits, where we can start to see how the foot is interplaying between the knee, the hip, and the rest of the body.
Yeah, absolutely. A big one is often in jumping, you'll see people collapse at the knee. But most likely it's actually coming from the foot because most force leakages happen at the foot. So we want to start analyzing their movement and what they're doing as an athlete for change of direction sprints, jumping, running, as Mitch said, and see if we can find any ways to actually cue them and see if all this grunt work that we've been putting in is starting to improve. So you take vision before and after, and this could actually take 3 to 6 months before we really start to see that transfer. So it's a journey and a process. You for the last bit. Burp. The next big impact we can have is by introducing our floating heel and foot specific strengthening primary lifts, where the foot is the big key aspect of the lift that we're doing. This is where we can get a big transfer into our sporting movements as well, and there's a big link to what we're doing at this final phase between the two. Again, we had to build the foundation with our basics before we get to this stuff. So if you get someone in on day one and you're trying to do the fancy floating heel front foot elevated lunge, you're missing out on so much that you could have done beforehand. That's a later drill. But we want to start to shift our training towards our heavy effort stuff with some barefoot stuff. But we always need to be careful
about dosage. All right. We would be smart taking into consideration things like whether the athlete is in season or in off season, how well they've adapted and handled phase 1 and 2, and ensure that if they are in season, we might only be integrating barefoot training or floating heel work into maybe one of their primary or accessory lifts. Whereas if they're off season, they've handled their stuff really well, then we might be looking at integrating it into multiple sessions a week, one primary, one accessory. But then also we've got to take into consideration whether we're integrating our barefoot training into our plyo and ballistic work as well. All right, because this is where we can see real transfer into their athletic sporting movements and kind of bridge that gap between barefoot training and athletic sporting movement training.
Back to me. So this concludes our overview of barefoot training. And back to me. So this concludes our overview of phasing your training when it comes to the foot. By all means, this is not the only thing you need to worry about. We haven't really talked about things like mobility, right? Which is also a big aspect of it. And also previous injury history. Because if someone has had a previous injury in the foot, you've obviously got to do a little bit more diligence with your time domains in terms of what you're trying to achieve with them. So be careful. So as always, make sure you know what you're doing. But if you want to learn more, go do some reading because there's so much out there. Take care, be safe, and train hard.